Hello, everyone, and welcome to this time at Avant, where I'll be talking about 7 top savvy secrets for the PTE exam. I'm going to share my screen now and begin showing you the presentation for today. And also just reminding you the reason that we really wanted to do this is because we know that many of you cannot always make it to a time with your specialist or instructor here in the AEP. So we wanted to record this information for you as you prepare for the PTE exam. And again, as I said, these are not really 7 savvy secrets. They're really ways, some of the best ways that you can prepare for certain parts of the PTE exam. So today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through the speaking and the writing part of the PTE exam. The listening and the reading parts are fairly straightforward. I'll touch on a little bit of that today. But what many nurses tell us is that they struggle with the speaking part, particularly read aloud. Repeat sentences is a big problem, describe images, and we're going to look at all of those sections today. And I'm going to give you some really good tips and hopefully some strategies that will help you be more successful on the PTE exam. So let's go ahead and begin. So let's start with read aloud. And I'm going in the order of the exam. So the first thing you do in the PTE exam is you are going to have a little bit of an introduction. You'll check your the mechanics and the technology of the computer that you're sitting at. But and you might even have a bit of a chat with an instructor or an examiner there. But once the test begins, you're going to be on the computer. And I should say this before we get started here. One thing you really need to know about is there's a 3-second rule for the PTE. I've got read aloud here, but remember this 3-second rule. As soon as you see you see the microphone turn on, I'm not sure what color it'll change. I can't remember. It might turn green or it might turn red, but there'll be some signal that that microphone has turned on. Sometimes you'll hear a beep. It'll be like beep. But as soon as you hear that, as soon as you see that, you need to begin speaking. If you wait longer than 3 seconds, then the audio will stop. The audio will not be recorded, and your response won't be recorded at all, and you won't get any score. So remember that 3 seconds. As soon as you are ready to speak, begin speaking. Do not wait longer than 3 seconds. Okay, so again, let's come into the read aloud here. So in the PTE exam, they're going to assess your rhythm and pronunciation as test takers take this part of the exam. You're going to be reading a paragraph. As you read this paragraph, you really want to take your time, okay? You don't want to add words or miss words, because if you add a word or you miss a word, it's going to decrease your score. So that's why you really need to take your time. You need good reading, rhythm, and pronunciation. And you will have about 30 to 40 seconds to prepare before you actually start reading. So you'll see the paragraph, and they'll give you some time to read it quietly to yourself so you can prepare. Look at those words. If there's any words you don't know, you can take a really good look at them and figure out where the stress goes, because stress and rhythm are going to be very important for this. Not only measuring your pronunciation of how well you say the words, but measuring how well you sound as you read. So as I said earlier, make sure you are not reading too fast or too slow. Generally speaking, for any paragraph that you see, 20 to 30 seconds would be plenty of time. Anything faster than 20 seconds is really too fast, okay? 30 seconds might be a little bit too slow, anything longer than that. And there'll be 6 or 7 of these on the exam. So what I'm going to do in the next slide is I'm going to show you here an example. This is an example you might see on the exam. You'll have some time to read it by yourself, as I mentioned. I won't take that time right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this for you. The first time I'm going to read it fast to show you what you should not do. The second time I'll read it slowly to show you what you could do and what you should do. So here we go. But on May 3, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 3-year volunteers for the Army and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 40,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution. Okay, far too fast. All right. It's, remember that the PTE is being graded by the computer. So the computer is really smart. They've built in some really strong algorithms into it. The AI is really smart. But if you slow down, it's going to enable it to catch a lot of your rhythm and a lot more of your pronunciation, and you're just going to sound better. So let me read this again in the way that you ought to be reading it. So here we go. But on May 3, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army, and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 40,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution. Okay, I hope you can clearly see the difference between the first reading and the second reading. And also I want you to notice that if you can see my cursor here, when we read, we naturally pause, and hopefully you heard those pauses in the second time. But you'll notice that I pause wherever there was a comma. Those are natural places to pause. And where there's a period, there's going to be a little bit of a longer pause in those cases. You'll also pause, usually before some prepositions like for. If you notice, I said read an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army. Okay. Now, these are just some suggestions, but the key, I think, to being very successful in read aloud is calming yourself down, slowing yourself down. Don't try to rush through, okay? Because if you rush, you speak quickly, and you also might make mistakes. And by the way, if you make a mistake while you're reading, if you remember earlier, and we go back to the previous slide, adding words or missing words decreases your scores. So in this case, because it's only a computer scored exam, if you make a mistake, if you read a word and you know you've read it wrong, in this case for the PTE, don't go back and correct it. Because what the computer is going to hear is another word, an added word. So with the read aloud, and really with much of the PTE, wherever even if you're repeating a sentence, you don't want to stop and correct yourself. If it's a human examiner, we understand that you're repeating or you're self-correcting, but the computer doesn't know that. So I know it's not natural, but again, if you make a mistake, don't stop and correct yourself. Just continue to move on and relax and get the rest of the words correct. Okay? So that's read aloud. And that tip about not correcting yourself is going to be true throughout the speaking exam. So I'll remind you a few more times. Okay, savvy tip number 2 is going to be on repeat sentences. Okay, and these are some needs and practices. So again, with all the speaking, the PTE is assessing your rhythm and pronunciation as test takers repeat sentences. You'll hear a sentence and you need to repeat that sentence word for word. If you add a word or you miss a word, it decreases your score. You need to have good rhythm and pronunciation. So that means that as you hear it, and again, remember the 3-second rule. As soon as you hear the sentence, go ahead and repeat it. Don't wait. I mean, you need to wait for the microphone to come on. But as soon as you see the microphone come on, go ahead and start repeating the sentence that you heard for a couple of reasons. If you wait too long, you might wait longer than 3 seconds, and of course, then there's no recorded response, and you lose points. But also, the longer you think about it, the more chances you have of forgetting it. So I think it's really the best idea. The best plan is to listen carefully and repeat it as soon as you are finished hearing it. But here's some things that, as I've worked with nurses and people who are preparing for the PTE the last couple of months, here's some tips. Listen for the meaning of the sentence. Okay, a lot of people are listening for the words. And a sentence is going to have anywhere from like 8 to 11 words or more. You really, I mean, even I can't read. If I'm just listening for every single word, I can't remember more than 4 or 5 words. In my short-term memory, it's just really difficult. So first of all, listen for the meaning. See if you can really understand the sentence, okay? And then listen for chunking. And I'll show this to you in the next slide. But rather than listen for 8 to 11 words, listen for the different parts of the sentence, okay? And sentences will be broken into 2 or 3 parts, depending on how long it is, okay? And when you listen to those chunks, if there's 2 chunks or 3 chunks, well, 2 chunks or 3 chunks is much easier to remember than all 11 words. And again, I'll give you an example of that in the next slide. Don't take notes. I just really can't emphasize that enough. There really is not enough time for you to take notes. These sentences are going to go by in like 3 to 5 seconds. And then you really just have to repeat it right afterwards, okay? Even if you wait 3 seconds, we're talking at tops 7 seconds. So you really don't have time to take notes. Some apps and some YouTube websites say take some notes, they give you some strategies. It's really not worth it, okay? You need to not be moving your hands. You need to be focusing in on what you hear, okay? And whatever you need to do, some people close their eyes and put their head down. Some people just put their head down and focus on something on the computer. That's what I would do. But I just take away all the distractions around me. And that's going to be a challenge for you at the PTE Test Center because there will be a lot of noise there. But be prepared for that. But during the repeat sentence, just focus into your little area, listen for that sentence and repeat, okay? And by the way, if practicing in test conditions help. And there's lots of apps, a lot of great PTE apps out there that you can download on your phones. And they give you practices, and some of them, if you pay for a month subscription, will actually give you feedback as well. There will be 10 to 12 of these repeat sentences on the exam. Let's look at some of these, okay? Now, on the test day, you're not going to be able to see them, okay? But look at this first sentence. I have 5 sentences here, okay? So you're going to hear, I used to have a cup of coffee with 1 sugar, okay? Now remember, if you try and remember, I used to have a cup of coffee with 1 sugar. I think that's 11 words. That's going to be really difficult. But how about this? I used to have a cup of coffee with 1 sugar. 2 chunks. I used to have a cup of coffee with 1 sugar. That's easier to remember, okay? Let's do number 2. The elephant is the largest land-living mammal. Again, 2 parts to that sentence. The elephant, well, maybe 3. The elephant is the largest land-living mammal. You can break it into 2 or 3 chunks, whatever's going to help you remember it best, okay? What I should do here is ask you to do this. I'll just do this real quickly. Close your eyes, okay? Just close your eyes if you can. I'm going to read number 3, and you've seen it, hopefully, but don't try and look at it right now. I'm going to read number 3. Let's see if you can repeat it in the quietness of your home. The result of the study will be published next month. Okay? By now, you should have repeated it. You can look and see if you got it right. Okay? Let's do number 4 and 5 the same way, okay? And see how you do. Number 4. There is limited funding in this department to support qualified students. Okay, that should be enough time for you to repeat it. There is limited funding in this department to support qualified students. Now, that could be 4 chunks, okay, if you want to do it that way, or 3, whatever is going to help you. But remember, listen to those parts of the sentence, okay? Let's do the last one here, all right? Let's see if you can get this one. Basketball was created in 1891 by a physician and a physical instructor. Okay, so hopefully this helps you, but do remember, I think the key here is this. Try not to listen for every single word, okay? Listen for the chunks, listen for the parts of the sentences. It'll make it very much easier for you to repeat these sentences. But again, I mentioned the 3-second rule earlier. I'm going to mention partial scoring right now, okay? So suppose you get the first part of the sentence correct, but you can't remember the last. Well, okay, that's fine. Remember, with the partial scoring, let me explain the partial scoring. So with partial scoring, if you get the first part of the sentence, if you remember basketball was created in 1891 by a physician, but you can't remember physical instructor, but you remember instructor, just say, and an instructor. you're going to get points for that. You've only missed one or two words, so you're still going to get some points for that. So even if you can't remember the whole end of the sentence, say what you remember, okay? And again, don't repeat. If you make a mistake, you know you made a mistake, don't say that word again because the computer thinks you're adding a word, all right? But also partial scoring. That should help your confidence, okay? Whatever you remember, you say, okay? Practice this, okay? I'm not going to recommend any particular app. There are lots of apps out there. You can talk to your friends, but all the apps that the nurses have told me about, they've got a great AI built into them. They've got practice exams, practice sections, and they give you feedback too. They actually give you some scores. Some of the nurses have showed me a whole breakdown of certain sections. So getting a good app is going to be very important for you, okay? But this is repeat sentence. So I think the takeaways here, just go back here quickly. Don't listen for every word. Listen for the pieces of the sentences and repeat what you hear. Try to listen for the meaning. And also, finally, repeat the rhythm. Okay, not just the words. Try to follow the rhythm of the speaker that you hear. Okay, that's going to help you have better rhythm than just saying all the words right. All right, and remember, 10 to 12 of these on the exam. They do give you a lot of these sentences. And I will say this, at the beginning, the first 3 or 4 sentences are pretty easy. Yeah, I think you're going to get those. They do get longer and more complex as they go, but you can do it, especially as you practice and use apps. And again, meet with specialists or meet with instructors if you have time. We're happy to help you. Okay, savvy tip number 3. Okay, for describe image, their needs in practice. Okay, again, PTE is always PTE is assessing your accuracy of the details and the thorough description, okay? As well as listening for oral fluency and pronunciation. So they're listening for your pronunciation, they're listening for your fluency, but they're also listening to make sure you got the details correct in the image that you're going to see. Synonyms are not necessarily needed. So if you've taken the IELTS before and you got IELTS in your mind, you're always thinking of paraphrasing and using synonyms. If you can, and it's quick, you can do that, but not necessarily needed for the PTE. You just need to repeat what is in the image. Say those words. And here's a template, okay? And if you go to E2 language, try not to promote any particular website, but if you go to some really good websites or use the apps, they're going to give you a template. And the template is simply an introduction, a description, and then a conclusion. And I'm going to give you an example of that in the next slide. You will have 25 seconds to prepare. You'll see the image on the screen. They give you 25 seconds to prepare, and that 25 seconds, take some notes, okay? Take some notes of what the key ideas are, or the key things you want to say, okay? And then you need to speak for 40 seconds. There will be 3 or 4 of these on the exam. So you don't have to use the whole 40 seconds. I would say definitely speak more than 20 or 25 seconds. But if you've gotten into about 30 seconds and you're wrapping it up, that's fine. You don't need to worry about using all 40 seconds. But if you use up to 38 seconds, that's probably good too. But I guess my point is here, don't worry so much about the time. Just make sure you're describing the images, okay? But do time yourself so you don't go over 40 seconds. And actually at 40 seconds, the recorder will stop, so you'll see that. But let's look at an image here, okay? Actually, I borrowed this image. There, you'll find, if you do a Google search for describe image PTE, you'll find some good websites, you'll find some good exercises, and of course, as I mentioned, PTE apps have some great practices as well. But I borrowed this from IELTS Task 1, okay? Because it's really the same idea. But IELTS Task 1, you're writing, and PTE, you're speaking at. So let me give you an example here of the introduction. Okay, again, like I said, remember, you don't need to worry about synonyms, okay? So the introduction of this would simply be something like this. The bar chart illustrates holiday leisure activities by Chinese, American, Turkish, and Brazilian tourists. That's your introduction, okay? So that probably took 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. Okay, maybe we'll say 5 seconds. Okay, but that's what you do. You just repeat what you see. Again, the introduction, the bar chart, and it's good to use a bar chart, pie chart, whatever kind of chart you see, line graph, whatever you see. The bar chart illustrates holiday leisure activities by Chinese, American, Turkish, and Brazilian tourists. There's your introduction. Now, after the introduction, it's time to deal with the information on the graph, okay? Here's a really good suggestion. I've seen this several places, and I think it's a good way to go, especially when you have a graph like this. There's a lot of information here, okay? Sometimes some of the practice graphs I've seen, you can actually talk about everything on it, but sometimes you might get a graph like this where there's too much information. You can't talk about everything. And I don't know that they're really looking for you to do that. But in this case, what you want to do is you want to choose the top and the low, okay? So for example, Chinese tourists spend the most time reading books at 8 hours a day versus Brazilian tourists who only spend about 2 hours a day. 4 hours a day reading books. Okay, I stumbled there a little bit, but during that you'll have time to 25 seconds to make notes. You want to make those notes so you don't stumble like I just did. Okay, so there's a high and a low. Okay, the Chinese tourists spend 8 hours a day reading books, whereas Brazilian tourists and Turkish tourists spend 4 hours a day reading books. There's a high and a low. I think you've got a little bit more time, so you can even add a little bit more information. American and Turkish tourists spend about the same time, but in different areas. For example, American tourists spend 5 hours reading books, whereas Turkish tourists spend 5 hours at the beach. Okay, I think we've got quite a bit of information now. Okay, so if we added all this together, we're probably about 20-25 seconds. Okay, so you could add a little bit more information if you wanted to, or you can begin your conclusion. And your conclusion would be something like this. This information will be very useful for tourist sites and industries so they can better prepare for tourists in the future. Making a prediction, making a kind of idea about how this information can be used. That would be a great conclusion. It can be simple, something like that. And now you wrap it up, you put all this together, and you've got 30 to 40 seconds, okay? I know it's easier said than done, but again, practice is going to help you do this. And again, lots of websites on the internet that will give you charts. They'll show you a sample, and they'll also give you a sample answer. And you'll get, I don't know in the apps if you'll get a sample answer, but you will get feedback on your efforts of trying and practicing, okay? So let me see if I can pull all this together. Let's see how it goes. This bar chart illustrates holiday leisure activities by hours of Chinese, American, Turkish, and Brazilian tourists. We can see that Chinese tourists spend 8 hours a day, double that of the nearest tourist, reading books. American tourists only spend 4 hours at the beach, while Turkish and Brazilian tourists spend 5 and 6 hours respectively. Finally, we can see that the Chinese spend the least amount of time visiting places. This information would be very useful for the tourism industry and particular sites for future tourists. Okay, that's off the top of my head, but that you get the idea of how you introduce it, you talk about the information, and you conclude it. Okay, again, do some Googling or whatever search engine you like for PTE describe image. You'll find some really good websites, but also if you have time, contact your AEP specialist or contact us instructors. We're happy to help you. And we have some resources that we would be happy to share with you and help you practice, okay? All right, very good. Let's move on to the fourth savvy tip, okay? Retell lecture, needs and practices. Okay, so this comes quickly, okay? You're going to see an image, and you're only given 3 seconds to look at that image that is related to the lecture, which is about 90 seconds. So you're going to hear a lecture on this image that you see, okay? And the lecture is going to be about 90 seconds or so. So as the lecture is going, as you're listening to the lecture, take notes. The PTE Test Center is going to give you a small whiteboard with a marker that you can take notes on. So use that whiteboard and that marker to take notes. Write down the key ideas, okay? You're going to listen to someone talking, or you're going to listen to a conversation about something. But there will clearly be 3 or 4 main ideas in this lecture, okay? Write those key ideas down, okay? So 10 seconds to prepare. After they stop you, you look at your notes, get your head together, and you got 40 seconds to speak. And remember that you're giving a summary of what you heard. A summary of what you heard. Now, this is going to be useful. This summary, this information is going to be useful for writing and also for another part of the test, the summarized spoken text, okay, and the listening part. These 3 parts really rely on summarizing. So be sure you know how to summarize, okay? The PTE assesses your content. Are you getting the right ideas? Did you get the main ideas? Are you repeating them, telling us about it? So they want to make sure, is your retelling thorough and accurate? And when I say thorough and accurate, did you get all the ideas? Okay, the main ideas. In a summary, you don't need to talk about details and examples, just the main ideas. So remember that. Don't worry about any of the examples. Don't worry about any of the details that they give you. They'll give you lots of those. The main ideas is what you want. Is what you want in the summary. So again, they're going to assess your fluency and your pronunciation. And again, the skills you really need for this, besides listening ability, you need to be able to understand what you're hearing. You need to be able to take good notes, and you need to be able to summarize. And again, let me repeat this. A summary is just making sure you got the main ideas. They will give you some examples, so they will give you some details. But those examples and those details are not included in the summary, okay? Just the main ideas, okay? Okay, and again, as I mentioned, this is the same skills you're going to use in summary writing and in summarized spoken text. Summarized spoken text comes in the listening section. It's very similar. It's retail lecture, but in this part here in the speaking, retail lecture, you speak it out. Summarized spoken text, you listen, same idea, you listen to a lecture for about 90 seconds or so, and then you write it out, okay? So that's in the listening section. But this is the speaking section here. So 1 to 2 of these will be on the exam. 1 to 2 of these will be on the exam, okay? I don't really have an example for a retail lecture here. Again, like I said, if you have a good app, they're going to have practices on the app. You can just do PTE retail lecture search at Google. You'll find some really good websites. Your specialists and the instructors, we know of some good websites, but I'm not here to actually promote any particular website. But this is the practice you need to do: summarizing, getting the main ideas, and repeating those ideas. Okay, 1 to 2 on the exam. So again, if you have time, do a web search, find some good practice websites, use your app, whatever app you have. All the apps that I've seen, there's 3 or 4 really good ones, or contact your specialist or one of us instructors. All right. So answer short questions, okay? Needs and practice. This is a really funny one. It's an interesting activity for the PT exam. Really what they're assessing here is your listening and your vocabulary, right? Okay, so sorry about the picture, got in front of these words here, but here's an example. What is the hair above your eyes called? Okay, this is the short answer, the short question, okay? What is the hair above your eyes called? You just simply say eyebrows, okay? They're really testing your vocabulary and your listening ability here. And there'll be 5 or 6 of these on the exam. They go pretty quick. So my suggestion for this one is you can practice a little bit with the examiner, with an instructor or a specialist, but go online, find a list of possible short answer questions or short question answers, They just give you a list of them. It'll tell you the question. They'll give you the answer. I wouldn't say memorize those, but just be prepared for those. Okay. Um, yeah, there'll be all kinds of things. Here's what I do remember. If a person who drives a car is called, if a person who is in a car is called a driver, what is a person who is in an airplane? Okay. And they'll say pilot. Okay. So things like that. Those are the kinds of questions you get. And by the way, you only need to say one word. Okay. A pilot. You can say two words, a pilot, but no more than two words, right? So answer short questions. Again, look on the internet, Google or whatever search engine you like, find a list of these questions and go through them. And again, your app, whatever app you're using, they will give you a lot of good practice on this and you can do it. So once you understand what's expected, you can practice this on your own, okay? Very few nurses have asked me, well, maybe the first time or two, they asked me to explain it to them, which I've just done for you. And then they find these lists and they practice on their own, okay? All right. The sixth savvy tip. All right, summarize writing, okay? So, retail lecture, summary writing, very similar in the skills needed, okay, to do this well. And I will give you an example for this one, okay, after we talk about some of the tasks and the details of this task. Read a passage. You're going to read a passage of about 300 words or less, okay? And you're going to write one sentence, a one sentence summary of no more than 75 words. You're given 10 minutes, okay? Now, when I practice this with the nurses, well, first of all, when they say, what, 300 words, one sentence summary, 10 minutes, they're like, oh my gosh, that's not enough time. It's really more than enough time, okay? Most of the time, once we go through this and we practice it, nurses finish in like 7 or 8 minutes, okay? The nurses I've been working with. So, and even if they don't, even if they take 10 minutes, that's okay, because you have 10 minutes to do it. So what this is assessing, the PTE is assessing your reading and your writing skills, okay? Assesses accurate content and sentence structure because you will need to write, you're going to have good sentence structure to put the summary together, and you're going to need much more than a simple sentence. You're probably going to need at least a compound sentence, okay? Because there's a lot of information in 300 words, and it's not all going to fit into one sentence, one simple sentence. So again, you need summarizing. You need the ability to summarize. And remember, again, I'll say it again. When you summarize, you only go for the main idea. That's all that's needed, okay? You're going to need to have some good note-taking skills. Because you'll have time. You have 10 minutes. You'll read the passage, and then as you read, you're taking notes on that whiteboard, just writing down some key ideas, the repeated ideas, because those are the main ideas, okay? And of course, good writing skills. There could be one or two of these on the exam. There will definitely be one. There may be two, but no more than two. So let me show you like this. You will get something like this on the exam, okay? And so let's just say right now, you see it, 10 minutes begins right now, okay? So you read this. I'll give you a few more. No, I'll just give you like 1 minute just to read this, okay? Give you an idea of what it is like. Okay, I didn't quite give you 1 minute, but I gave you about 45 seconds. So by this point, you've probably picked up that you need to be writing about successful language learners. Okay. How people learn languages. Okay. How do successful language learners learn languages? Well, they practice. They use the language. Okay. They're not concerned too much about making mistakes. They know that mistakes are going to happen. They're a little embarrassed, but they go forward and they continue to practice the language. Okay. So they give you some examples, right? In the same way. They're not certain here. For example, here's a for example. Okay. Remember, in the summary, you've only got 75 words. You got one sentence. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the example. Okay. You don't need to include that. You're really looking for the main ideas. You're going to be writing about successful language learners, are not concerned about making mistakes, and they use the language to get better. Okay, they use the, reading, writing, speaking, listening. They just keep using it till it gets better. So that's really all you need to write about there. Okay, so in 45 seconds, you might not have finished the whole paragraph, but had I given you 15 or 30 more seconds, you probably would have finished the whole passage. Of course, that's just the first time through. Then you're going to go through, take some notes, pick out some of the key ideas. So maybe by that time, you still are 3 or 4 minutes. You still got 6 minutes to write. You can see you've got time here, okay? And let me show you a one-sentence summary of this text. And it's 26 words, okay? You don't want to write more than 75 words, okay? But you don't need to get so close. I mean, some people do. You can. But I think really a 30 words to 40 words, or even a little bit less, is going to be enough to get you a good score on this section, okay? Good language learners are willing to make mistakes and use English in order to communicate so they can improve their language skills at the same time. Very good. Okay, this is all you need to do. Okay, this is what we would call a compound sentence here. Okay, we've got good language learners to make mistakes and use English to communicate. They can improve their language skills at the same time. I'm using the so here as a conjunction to put the ideas together. A really good compound sentence is going to be very useful for you in this particular activity. So know how to combine your sentences. You could use a complex compound sentence if you wanted to as well. And by the way, we do offer classes. You could take it's an IELTS class, but you could certainly take it. It would apply to all writing. We have a class called Grammar Review Sentence Structures, where we talk about how to write good sentences. So feel free to register for those classes. It's called Grammar Review Sentence Structures. Okay, so that's summarized written text. Okay, I know I'm kind of wrapping this up into really nice packages, and it's easier said than done. But I hope what you're taking away here is that, oh, this is a manageable test. None of these tests are really more than you can do. You can handle these things, okay? Okay, here's my last 7th savvy tip. We're talking about the PTE essay. So if you have IELTS experience, if you're familiar with IELTS, I'll just build on that experience. This would be task 2, IELTS writing task 2. If you haven't gotten any IELTS experience, no need to worry. Basically, what you need to write here is a good academic essay, okay? So PTE assesses the writing form. We're looking at mechanics and grammar. Mechanics meaning the periods and the commas and things like that. Grammar, are your subject and your verb, are they agreeing? Sentence structure, vocabulary, are you using good vocabulary? Are you using a variety of vocabulary too? You might definitely want to use some synonyms for the writing here. And task completion, meaning did you answer the question? So for the PTE essay, and there's only going to be one, okay? There's only going to be one on the test. The essay needs to be a minimum of 200 words, but no longer than 300 words. So anywhere between 200 and 300 is fine, okay? But do remember this, if you write less than 200 words, your score is going to decrease. If you write more than 300 words, your scores decrease. So more words do not equal better, okay? So once you've got your ideas, your main ideas down, you've got 200 words or more, you're good, okay? So remember, I mentioned a 4-paragraph essay, okay? Very common academic essay form. You want to have an introduction, but in your introduction, you clearly write what you're going to be writing about, okay? Your first body paragraph is your first reason with some examples. Second body paragraph, a second reason with more examples, and then your conclusion, wrapping it up, okay? Reminding the reader what you've written about, restating your introduction, that there's a thesis statement in the introduction that just says what you're clearly going to be writing about. In the conclusion, you restate that. You restate that in simple terms. The conclusion can be 2 sentences. Does not need to be long, and there should not be any new ideas in the conclusion. Again, contact your specialist or instructors if you want more help. And again, here's some examples of writing topics. But let me finish my thought. Again, if you need any help, contact your specialists or contact us instructors. We are here to help you. And also, PTE apps have some great questions and great exercises for you as well. But anyway, here's some very common types of question prompts for the writing prompts. Should successful sports stars and glamorous film stars be role models for youngsters? Do you agree or disagree? The environment we are living in is in danger due to various problems. Who do you think should be responsible for solving the problem? Is it the responsibility of governments, organizations, or individuals? So remember, if you get a question like this, you don't need to choose all 3. You shouldn't choose all 3. You want to choose one, okay? And give your reasons why you think it should be government, or it should be organizations, or it should be individuals, okay? All right, so if you need more help, again, contact us here at Avant. We're happy to help you. Okay, so we're coming to the end. I've given you 7 savvy secret tips for the PTE. But what I'd like you to do is just remember this. There are lots of PTE apps that are very good for you, okay? Find one that works best for you, okay? They're out there. The website is becoming more and more full of good exercises for a lot of these tasks that you see. And again, if you have even just a moment, email us at the AEP team email for suggestions. We'd be happy to send you some information. And if you can meet with us, that would be even better. When possible, after you get a hang of these tips and a hang of the task, practice under test conditions. The only way you get better is to practice. So practice and practice. And again, I'll say it one final time. Be sure and contact your Avant AEP specialist or one of us instructors for help. So I believe that's it for today. Thank you for coming and watching this. I hope it's helped you. I hope you all have a great day wherever you may be.